Mednoia, near Kalinin, where the Polish officers had been executed and buried in mass graves, the better to keep watch over the bones. But now something had changed radically. After some initial hesitation at the beginning of his time in power, Gorbachev had decreed that the time had come to fill in the blank spots of history. There could be no more rose-colored glasses, he said. At first his rhetoric was guarded. He spoke of thousands instead of tens of millions of victims. He did not dare criticize Lenin, the demigod of the state. But despite Gorbachev's hesitation, the return of historical memory would be his most important decision, one that preceded all others. For without a full and ruthless assessment of the past, an admission of murder, repression, and bankruptcy, real change, much less democratic revolution, was impossible. The return of history to personal, intellectual, and political life was the start of the great reform of the 20th century. And, whether Gorbachev liked it or not, the collapse of the last empire on earth. For decades, the massacres at Kalinin, Starobelsk, and Katyn had been a symbol for the Poles of Moscow's cruelty and imperial grip. For a Pole merely to hint that the Soviet Union was responsible for the massacres was a radical, even suicidal act, for it made clear the speaker's point of view. The friendship of peoples, the relationship between Moscow and Warsaw, was one based on violence, an occupier's reign over its satellite. Even Gorbachev knew that to admit the massacres would be to undermine the Polish communists. But by 1990, with solidarity in power, Gorbachev saw little to lose. While General Wojciech Jaruzelski was visiting Moscow, Gorbachev finally conceded Moscow's guilt and turned over to the Polish government a huge packet of files on the massacres at Katyn, Starobelsk, and Kalinin. Soon after the Kremlin's admission of guilt, the excavations began. Working with Soviet army soldiers and Polish volunteers, Colonel Tretetsky started work in Mednoia on August 15, 1991. Tretetsky, a career officer in his mid-40s with a thin mustache and sunken cheeks, had spent several months uncovering graves in Starobelsk. With every new grave he felt himself more deceived. He had believed deeply in communism and the Soviet Union. He served first in the Navy, and then, after studying law in Ukraine, signed on in the military for life. He served nearly 4 years in East Germany, and even volunteered to be sent to Czechoslovakia in 1968, the year the Soviet Union crushed the Prague Spring. "I was dumb," Tretetsky said. "I believed in it all. I would have given my life for the motherland on a moment's notice." He petitioned the military for a commission to Afghanistan and served there from 1987 to 1989. Tretetsky came home to Moscow only to get a bitter taste of the real history of the country he knew so little about. He was assigned to the military prosecutor's office, which was conducting massive investigations into the rehabilitations of people who had been repressed over the past 70 years. Slowly he began to learn about some of the ugliest incidents in Soviet history. The purges, the massacre of the Polish officers, the army's bloody attack on peaceful demonstrators in 1961 at Novocherkassk. Put in charge of the excavations, first in Starobelsk and now in Mednoia, Tretetsky attacked his work with passion and precision. In Mednoia, he knew perfectly well where to dig and what to look for. He had already interrogated a local man, a retired officer of the secret police, who had helped carry out the orders from Moscow in 1940. Vladimir Tokarev was blind and 89 years old by the time history caught up with him, but his memory was clear. Sitting with Tretetsky and a video camera,